Welcome to the High Tea with Grace podcast, where we spill the tea on HIT. I'm honored to welcome Mary Russell, a retired Navy nurse and Senior Director for Clinical Implementation at CliniComp. Thanks for joining us today, Mary.
Thank you, Grace. I'm so happy to be here.
And we're so happy to learn from you today. So let's start by having you share with us your journey from starting as a registered nurse to becoming, to joining the Navy and becoming the Senior Director for Clinical Implementation. So what motivated you to transition into healthcare IT? Kind of want to hear all about it. Tell me about your whole life.
Okay. Well, I will try to be interesting. So I have been a nurse for a very long time. I am a well-seasoned nurse. I graduated from college back in 1987 as a registered nurse with my bachelor's degree. And in the 80s, nursing jobs were plentiful. There was no shortage. You could go to any hospital and get hired. You would have multiple offers out the door. So one lovely day, there was this very sweet Navy Nurse Corps recruiter at the college. And after a somewhat brief conversation, I signed up for the Navy. So upon graduation, I entered the Navy Nurse Corps and had some great assignments as an active duty, young, brand new nurse. It is in the Navy, there's an expectation not only that you will be clinically excellent, but that you will develop as a leader as well. And so right from graduation, they put you on that track and provide mentorship and direct mentorship, which, I think we've lost a little of today. And so it was a great time. I met my husband, I got married, all those things you do, and got out of active duty service in 1991. And then I worked at local hospitals. I had a few different jobs. I worked on a surgical care unit with a great team of nurses. I loved that job. I loved those people. They were fabulous. And then I went back for my master's degree. And then the Navy actually sent me a letter and said, hey, you're going to have to resign your commission as an officer in the Navy Nurse Corps, or you're going to have to start drilling as a reservist. So, yeah, I was like, I kind of loved that career for me as a Navy nurse, and I loved the actual clinical nursing that I had done too. So I thought it would be the best of both worlds. And so I rejoined as a reserve nurse. And of course, the world went a little crazy, right? After that, 9/11, and then just years and years and years of war. And so I had a number of recalls to care for the wounded veterans at the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, which is now the Walter Reed National Medical Center. And we were inundated with casualties. So it was an amazing time, but again, with an amazing group of people who worked together to do our best under difficult circumstances. And that was stateside. So all of these things came together, right? The early nursing experience and leadership, and then being put into these difficult situations with these combat veterans. And then ultimately I got sent to the front in Afghanistan in 2009 into 2010. So it was all of that experience had set me up for that experience there. And then when I came back, though, I was a little burned out of direct patient care. So a friend of mine who actually works with me now called me and said, hey, Mary, CliniComp's hiring for clinical analysts. I really think you should take this job. You would be really good at it, and we need you, and, come join us. So, but I live in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia, and CliniComp is based in San Diego. So, yeah, I really wasn't sure what that was going to look like. But I did, and I've been with CliniComp for 14 years, from a clinical analyst now to the senior director of our clinical team. And it's been a great journey along the way. And I stayed in the reserves until 2019. I retired. But the nice thing about that was I had two careers. I had CliniComp career, and I had the Navy career. And the Navy requires you as a nurse to actually maintain your clinical skill set. So I was still able to provide bedside nursing care up until 2018 with the Navy. So I really have had the best of all worlds.
Inspiring. Oh my goodness, what a background, right? Thank you for your service. Thank you for all the time dedicated to our country, to, to the US. I mean, you're amazing, Mary. I'm so inspired by you. And having served as a Navy nurse corps in both inpatient and outpatient military environments, how did those experiences shape your approach to healthcare and clinical implementation?
Yeah, I think that you have to, when I went to nursing school, it was driven into us that you have to view the patient holistically, that this moment in time with a disease process is not only impacting their physical health, but all aspects of their life. I think that training combined with the inpatient, outpatient. I also was fortunate enough to be on the USNS Comfort, which is the hospital ship, and go to countries like Haiti and Nicaragua and really provide care in very austere environments. And even here in the States, you need to understand from the outpatient side, what resources does this person have? What kind of support? What's their diagnosis? Are they going to need psychological support, spiritual support for end of life? All of those considerations. And I think that framework has helped me to ensure that every day in our job, we advocate for all of the staff who are using our products in the field, and then all of the downstream impact that has on a patient. And are they able to look at the whole picture, inpatient or outpatient?
So interesting to think about it even more holistically, given that experience you had. We hear a lot about veteran mental health challenges, and that being a missing piece in a lot of this. Can you kind of provide an example of how, are there any stats and concerns talking about veteran mental health that could speak to? And how are healthcare organizations kind of leveraging technology to try to help address those issues and that whole person care thought process and issue?
Yeah, obviously it remains a big topic. Veterans are still 1.5 times higher risk to commit suicide. And an alarming statistic for me is that when you break that down and look at male versus female veterans are 2.5 times higher successful suicide, which is shocking to me in so many ways. And I think that speaks to all of the difficulties that they encounter on a daily basis. Whether they're deployed or stateside, the stresses of leaving your home, leaving your family, how well are they supported? What experiences are they having? Obviously, this generation that is serving now, they are the post 9/11 young people, right? And they have grown up in a world full of strife and stress. And I think that we have to keep adapting to their mental health needs, things like gender identity and how does that equate to military service? Where do I bunk? How do I dress? All of those things. I think we didn't have to deal with those as openly. And this generation they are very well equipped, I think, to speak about their mental health concerns. They talk a lot about their anxieties and things. And I think that Veterans Health and really so many companies and corporations are trying to leverage technology to empower them with tools at their hands, with mobile applications, things that will let them do mental health self-assessments, as well as coaching, PTSD coaches. All of these are apps. And this generation, that's all they know. They grew up with phones, right, Grace? You're
Oh, I know. Yeah, we grew up with phones and understanding that we can use an app to help us with X, Y, Z, and that, and honestly, keep using it. And we want it to look good. We want it to be easy to use, right? And as long as we have that, we'll use it. So I think that's interesting that you say that is a huge part of this. Is that this next generation is ready for that? Maybe it will help a lot.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I really hope so. I hope that, that they can tap into that. I think that there's young people, think of veterans, the VA as old people's, that's where the old people go. And that's just not true. They're incorporating more and more women's health as part of their specialties. And really, they have grown with the times and prepared for the next generation, as they've done successfully through other generations in the past.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. You went from nurse to to nurse for the Navy, and then you went to a healthcare informatics leader. So I'm interested, what advice would you give to nurses now who are interested in transitioning into a Navy nurse, and then who might also then be interested in transitioning into healthcare informatics? I'd love to hear, advice from each of those steps that you feel might be particularly helpful or valuable. Do you find that there are skills or experiences that are valuable in each of those different steps that you've taken in your journey?
Yeah, I think that obviously, number one, stay clinically adept. Whether that's actual hands-on nursing practice or whether it's through conferences and continuing education and things like that, you have to be abreast of what the best practices are, because they're always evolving. And you have to understand that if you've been away, know where you need to make sure that your skill set is up to par. Take advantage of mentors. I am the age group that we're all retiring now from the bedside. If you're a clinical nurse at the bedside, you need to take advantage of the mentors who are there and have clinical experience. I think that if you want to transition to informatics, you need to first learn your system. What electronic system are you charting with? What do you use? Understand it deeper, become a super user. Work on implementations, be an early adopter, be somebody that's going to drive workflows that will optimize your daily experience. You can do that right now in your current position. And then if you want to move to the informatics world, make sure you're actually really good with computers. Make sure that, you learn and develop processes and workflows and how to implement a system, training, things like that. So
very interesting. Yeah, it's all important thoughts to think about, and if you're a nurse looking to get in, get that mentor, stay on top of your game, know technology. It's going to be critical for whatever next step you take, whether you better your career as a nurse or you decide to change your career and like Mary did, have multiple careers at once as a nurse. That's pretty fantastic. So, I want to tap now into your clinical implementation brain, because I've been hearing in the news a lot about all of these tornadoes going through the Midwest. Insane, nonstop, not to mention the interruptions of service and cybersecurity attacks. I want to dive in with you about the importance of disaster recovery and the role that EHR systems can play to ensure that there's no downtime during these huge events where healthcare is needed more than ever, And so let's dive a little bit into this topic. And I want to hear a little bit about just different strategies you do or have gone through in relation to this whole idea of clinical implementation and just clinical ongoing ability to keep going during disasters happening.
Yeah, it's one thing to implement a system at a hospital or a clinic or wherever you're working. But if that system goes down, or even if it has scheduled downtime, those things are so disruptive to the continuity of care for your patients. And so where I work at CliniComp, we have a near zero downtime for 40 years. It's unheard of. And our company has been through those disasters with our customers literally around the world. The tsunami in Japan, when that hit, we had hospitals there, and we at CliniComp, everybody, all hands on deck. We're going to migrate these records and make sure that as they evacuate everyone, they have access to their critical health information. Because the problem is that a tornado blows in, or a flood, or a tsunami, those things don't wash away your chronic and critical healthcare needs. They, right? If
anything, they exacerbate them. I mean, it's a very stressful situation to be going through, not to mention potentially losing their home, to electricity, to work, and money. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so being cognizant of that, having experience with that, certainly at 9/11, we were at a hospital in New York City, and our system was one of the only things still running. When they had nothing else, they were still able to triage and move all of those critical workers and employees, everybody that was impacted by that. And then you have Hurricane Sandy. Again, I'm an East Coast person, so these things were directly in my lifetime.
Me too. I'm an East Coast girl, and all those things impacted my life significantly. I can't imagine I can't imagine, just like with an EHR system, how many lives it impacts if it ever goes down. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even calculate in my brain how many people would be impacted by that.
Yeah, right. I mean, millions of records online, millions of staff and patients. And, you really need to be able to maintain that continuity of care, especially, as you said, under the most difficult of circumstances. And if you can't get to the data or the information, as you said, it's just going to exacerbate the patient's condition and anxieties, and it's just terrible. And so
what's the secret sauce? Like, what is the secret sauce to disaster recovery and making sure that you stay alive in your clinical systems during things like this? Like, what keeps people going and keeps the system going?
Well, I think planning. I think a system architecture that is adaptable and is well integrated into the seamless medical record keeping system, one that's mobile, one that is sustainable, is just critical. If your infrastructure is not sound, if your architecture is and then when these events hit, there's nowhere for you to go. You cannot move forward for the patients who need you and the nurses and the providers and everybody without that underlying sustainable system.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that experience and just the knowledge that you all have gained through your 40 years doing it. It's pretty impressive. I'm wondering, how do you see the role of health IT evolving in the next 5 years, 10 years, particularly in relation to patient care, disaster recovery, and, clinical systems?
Honestly, I think that the current progression in healthcare and in health IT is already ramping up. It has been, especially in the last 10 years that I have seen. I've been with CliniComp for 14 years in this clinical analyst, director roles now. And I think that we've come, when I started nursing, we were on paper, right? And so we've come a long way from, you wanted to do research to try to come up with a solution for a problem. You were sitting and sifting through paper records, trying to find that needle stack. It was labor intensive. It was long in duration. But now everything is electronic. That data is queryable and at your fingertips at any given time. So I think that the data scientists and the researchers and all of the people involved in AI are going to be able to take that data and exponentially move us forward in the next 5 to 10 years, whereas it might have taken us time to get all the data and then to understand how to analyze it and then what to do with it. So I think everybody that's working in health IT needs to be prepared for rapid integration of changes in the way that we manage patients and the way that we document on those patients and the way we analyze that data and change best practices consistently.
Such a great perspective. And it's inspiring. As a patient and caregiver, I always think about these things and you look at the system and it feels like there's no hope because there's so much broken But when you hear about innovations and ideas and people like yourself that are leading the way to make changes so it's better, you can't help but have an optimistic outlook. Like, wow, Mary's on it, we're good. Then I am good. It puts a face to the name of the innovators that are solving the problems. And I just, I want to encourage our listeners today. Like, I want to know your stories. People need to hear your stories of how you're innovating in space. People have to hear them because it's hope and life giving to a space that really is lacking. So, Mary, I want to learn more about you. As you have done so much in your life, and have built such a beautiful career. What are things that you do as a leader to work your best and make a difference? Are there habits you have in your day to day or things that you do to just keep you on your game?
I think that, the totality of my experiences have hopefully helped me to be a compassionate leader. I think that family first is my mantra with the folks who work for me. That comes first and foremost. If they don't feel that things are stable or steady or comforting at home, then they're not going to work well for me. You have to listen to people. I like to talk, obviously, but you have to be a listener. Learning the generational changes in communication styles, in wants and needs and desires from a career perspective. It's not like mine. They have different life goals and ambitions and quality of life. And I think we can all learn from that. This job is taxing. It's travel. It's a significant amount of travel. So you really, really need all the support to stay healthy as a family, healthy as an individual, healthy as an employee. And from my perspective, I want to make sure that everybody always fully supported and not micromanaged. I trust my staff. They're fabulous, smart, intelligent people. I learn from them every day. You don't have to know everything as a leader. First of all, you shouldn't think you do. If you think you do, that's a bad thing. So just take a second and learn, continue to learn and grow, but support your team.
Such solid advice, Mary. I appreciate you sharing that with us. If you could give your younger self a piece of advice, if you could go back and say, see young Mary who's just starting nursing, like, what's that piece of advice?
Oh, Grace, that's a great question. That
No, it's a hard one because it's deep and I'm sure there's so much advice, but yeah, what would you tell young?
Yeah, because I certainly never saw my career going the way that it did. Not at all. I was born and raised in a blue collar neighborhood, lots of immigrant families, hardworking. And I went to Catholic school for 16 years. I was taught by the nuns. So hard work and discipline were really entrenched in my life. And I value those skills. But I think what I would say, and I think my children would probably agree, is I would tell myself, you don't have to work that hard. Don't work so hard. Good things will come, but be satisfied. Sometimes it's okay to just be satisfied with where you are. I have a tendency to be a little ambitious, and I worked more than I probably needed to at times. So I think that's what I would tell myself.
I love it. Take a break, listeners. Take a break.
Yeah. Take a minute, drink a cup of tea.
And drink a cup of tea. So to finish this conversation off right, where can our listeners best find you online?
I am on LinkedIn, and I think that's probably the easiest place. I've done other bylines and interviews and things there. And so you'll often find CliniComp posting my other thoughts and ideas about health IT.
Terrific. Now, before I forget, did you happen to bring tea with you today, drinking tea? Although I drank it the whole time. You chatted the whole time.
I told you I like to talk.
No, tell me. That's what I love. We want that. We want to hear from you. So tell us about your mug or your tea. I would love to hear about it.
Oh, yes. This little mug was a gift from my mom. And Again, I'm Irish, so I was raised drinking tea, and I love tea. I love everything about tea. So this is English breakfast tea. I will either English breakfast or Irish breakfast. And I just love, everybody should drink tea, I think, because it really starts your day off just right, right? You have to put the kettle on. It takes time for the kettle to boil. Love that sound of the whistle. And then you put the tea, and you have to let the tea steep. So you do that. So I think it just really starts your day. I love the pace of it. It eases me into my day. And then by the bottom of the cup, I'm full of caffeine and ready to go.
Even just hearing you talk about the process of making and drinking the tea is comforting. Not to mention the process of actually doing it. So, oh, that's too good. Thank you so much, Mary, for joining us today. We love learning from you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Grace. Great to meet you. Congratulations to you on all your success. And I can't wait to see how your career continues to grow and develop also.
Oh, truly appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks to you folks for joining us too. Check out the HITea with Grace podcast website for more interviews with amazing guests like Mary today. Cheers.
Cheers.